A pleb tier review of BIOSHOCK? Yeah, no, great. Smash that dislike and subscribe so you can also dislike all the future videos. I think we're finally reaching a point where we can be honest about the year 2007 and how not good it was for gaming. And to be honest, I need to play a couple more immersive sims on this channel before my inevitable Cyberpunk review later this year, assuming we all live that long. Let's talk about that term, immersive sim. It came up in my Singularity review. See, in the early 90s when shooters were first a thing, most of them were pretty basic and just about clearing levels of enemies. As the 90s went on, games started to get a bit more complex in what they could do. You went from having a game where you just killed demons for fun, to games with complex level scripting. Then there was a schism. You had people who wanted to return to that simple formula of gameplay challenge, and you had people who... Alright, this will sound a bit masturbatory. You had people who wanted to push the limits of the tech to tell more complex stories. Now I want to be clear. There's a certain charm that's been lost from old games that focus more on gameplay and having a good time that is missing from the more homogeneous mess that came from that second branch. It's not exclusive. One philosophy is not better than the other, but there are a lot of big brains who took that second path that think it is. Immersive sim is a masturbatory term. It's supposedly a genre that emphasizes player choice, but I'll be honest with you, that should be all of video games. Player choice is what separates games from films. Just keep those words player choice in mind moving forward. Before we can start, we have to get the game, and of course you best believe there is a remaster.
Son, you're special. You were born to do great things. You know what? They were right.
No thank you. Oh, silly me, that wasn't a choice. A player choice, because I am a player of this game. They don't sell the original anymore. They want me to spend 20 bucks on the remaster and then they'll give me the original for free. Yes, I absolutely have to have the remaster version of this game from 2007 because there might be compatibility issues with my operating system from 2009. Not that I didn't have issues. You couldn't have just patched the issues for free, 2K? Issues that are mostly fixed with simple INI edits and software updates? Not even for free. You charged people money for the remaster that you're now bundling the original with, which means you are actually morally obligated to make sure the original runs out of the box on modern hardware. Something it doesn't do for some reason because by default it verifies whether or not you meet the minimum specs before running the game. And since my graphics card isn't on the list of recognized cards, it just assumes that rather than playing this game in the future, I must be trying to boot this up on some Russian GPU from the 90s. And it's like all you have to do to fix this problem is edit one fucking line in the config file so that everyone who tries to play BioShock doesn't have to Google why the game keeps crashing on startup. Speaking of crashing, the game opens with a plane crash next to a lighthouse. I would normally say that's convenient, but spoilers, we crashed the plane purposefully to get here. Seems like a needless gamble because we could have easily ended up anywhere in the Atlantic, so it's not convenient, it's worse. Convoluted. The lighthouse here is an entrance to the underwater city of Rapture, and you pretty much get the feeling that this game is about to overextend its intellect for the sake of commentary as soon as you walk in. You're telling me that hundreds if not thousands of people dared to trip to the lighthouse in the middle of the Atlantic to start a life in Rapture, and they all passed by the statue on the way and didn't immediately decide to leave? I just crashed a plane to get here, and I figured my chances with a makeshift raft would probably be better than whatever's going on in here. One speech about the premise of this game from Andy Ryan, and we're to some gameplay. It's a bit stilted. This guy takes 5 or 6 whacks with a wrench to go down. He's the first enemy in the game, by the way. This gives the impression that the wrench is one of those melee weapons that goes away forever once a gun shows up, which is a shame because the wrench is actually pretty good later on. Now you might be thinking, well, just turn the difficulty down to medium if you want a better feeling shooter. The issue is, right, enemy health is not consistent. What it takes to kill the same enemy with the same gun can differ drastically at different points in the game. So the difficulty doesn't just create bullet sponges, it creates bullet sponges in an environment where sometimes there's no water so the sponges are brittle. It just doesn't feel natural or immersive having an enemy who goes down in a couple revolver shots, only to later shrug those off like it's nothing. Don't get attached to the revolver because it's basically worthless later in the game, even with upgrades. By now we should be in Rapture and Frank Fontaine, Atlas, sent Johnny to save us, only for him to get murked by this totally intimidating enemy that will definitely be a challenge later on. We reach this room that there is no way out of except to take a free needle from a vending machine and inject it into our arm, the act of which causes us to panic and fling ourselves from a balcony. only for other people to somehow get into this room without shocking the door control, which begs the question of why the fuck we stuck ourselves with a random needle. Wait, are those chains tattooed on our arms? Get it? Because we're a slave that lacks player agency? Somebody is getting their ass whipped raw after this video is done. The introduction of plasmids is really bad. I understand wanting to ensure players will encounter and use the system, but could you have kindly done this in a way so it made sense how other people were supposed to have gotten in here, but I couldn't get out? Plasmids are the game's magic system, and while the first 3 are introduced pretty well, there are another 5 or 6 that just show up in vending machines. This one is Electric Bolt. It can stun enemies for easy kills, or you could just shoot them. It can also be shot into water to kill enemies, but only sometimes.
There you go. Oh, down for the count. How about a little just to make sure your cooks feel good?
The game does that trick where it will show the enemies in advance with their shadows. It does this on a few occasions, but this is not actual dynamic lighting as it only happens in a few scripted moments. That's how the game introduces the pistol, with me stealing it from a woman's baby stroller. You may have noticed that everybody is just a little bit insane in this game. This is on account of the aforementioned plasmids. Apparently they make people crazy, which is concerning given how we just had to dose ourselves a few times that is outside of player control. Maybe all my criticism is invalid because it was all hallucination and I just can't take the game at face value. I'm still going to because it's cowardly to try and hide behind the shield of subjective reality in order to protect your favorite pieces of entertainment media from scrutiny. You guys realize that if it's all hallucination from an unreliable narrator, then the game is actually about nothing, right? Which means all its commentary would be entirely worthless and a waste of time, which is even worse. So let's all agree this isn't a hallucination, okay? Rapture is a post-apocalyptic city. Most of the actual story is about the rise and fall of Rapture, which makes it convenient there's such a well-crafted narrative made available entirely by pre-recorded audio logs littered through an environment that have survived the apocalypse. The story doesn't make much sense without them, but at the same time, you probably aren't going to find them all. There's 122 of them. I just feel that somebody is going to point out some piece of crucial information I missed that was only available in, say, log 75, that is crucial to understanding the narrative. But it gets complicated because I can't discount all the information that was in these logs entirely because then the story degrades in quality drastically. I did genuinely try to find most of them, as I would explore the entirety of levels, but there are 2 problems. Occasionally I would just outright miss some. Others I would forget to play because of sudden combat, or because they would put 2 really close to one another, and others still would be cut off entirely by the radio transmissions. Audio logs aren't entirely bad, they provide supplementary information that can't be listened to during gameplay. However, the game places critical information that is key to understanding the story in these logs. Why did everybody go crazy? It's in the logs. Andrew Ryan's betrayal of principles and switch to authoritarianism? In the logs. Frank Fontaine's entire character? In the logs. The problem is, this isn't really utilizing the storytelling capabilities of the interactive medium. The player's choice in this scenario are to start and stop the playback of an MP3. The game's story should be more so about interacting with the setting of Rapture, and not why Rapture exists in the first place. The story seemingly exists to provide a pretense for why we are playing these levels, and spoiler alert, the pretense of saving Atlas's family is false. Because playing a game for the sake of fun is for lowbrow cavemen. The levels in BioShock are not linear in a strict sense, but in reality more like a series of increasingly major inconveniences. We need to get through an area blocked by ice, so we go and find the fire plasmid. We need to get through an area blocked by rubble, so we go and find the telekinesis plasmid. We need to get through an area blocked by smugglers, so we go and get some pictures of Spidey splices. The game more than once pulls the trick of having the level exit near the entrance, but having us go complete some objectives before proceeding that requires extensive backtracking. This is fine like once in a linear game, but it is seriously ridiculous. We have to bring all the trees back to life before we can lift the lockdown. We have to turn and complete an art piece for a crazy guy before he unlocks the elevator. We have to build a bomb to turn off some electricity before we can meet Andrew Ryan. The actual path from the beginning and end of the game is actually pretty short. The game is only long because we took the longest and most inconvenient route. Mixed among this is the game's resource management, a system that worked well early on. You're limited in how much ammo you can carry in such a way that each engagement becomes a mental calculation. Will I end this fight better or worse off than before? I found myself exploring areas more so because I wanted to put myself in a better position to fight than for any particular level objective or story purpose, and I feel that was a better way of having players explore levels than arbitrarily locking the door to progress behind objectives. However, problems started to emerge. I quickly got the feeling of the developers being overbearing as I repeatedly would reach a surplus of ammo and couldn't pick up anymore. I was less so using weapons appropriately for the situation, and more so using my electric shotgun ammo because I had it maxed out and wanted to be able to pick up if I found more. I find it strange that so many things can be upgraded with the tonic system, except for the maximum ammo capacity. There are special ammo types, and they all run the risk of being too cool to use. Early in the game, I faced a splicer boss, Dr. Steinman, and this was around the time anti-personnel rounds started showing up, so I started saving them for bosses that never really came. There are also armor-penetrating rounds, useful for robots and big daddies. Big Daddies, a primary part of the promotion, shown off early in the game, hyped up to be super dangerous foes and even on the box art. That's not to fake you out and say they're pushovers, I got my ass beat more than a couple times. What I want to do is highlight something that happened in my game on the third or so level, the Wharf. Players are encouraged to go after the Big Daddies for their little sisters. We'll get to that player choice, don't worry. So, they act as quasi-optional boss fights. Cue me facing not one, not two, not three, but 4 Big Daddies in a row. One of those I didn't have to fight, but was actually respawning, still. And on the final one, I had to bump the difficulty down because I didn't have enough ammo to kill him on hard. Some daddies have a drill they carry as a melee weapon. They do charging attacks that you would think to dodge, but you aren't going to be cool enough to reliably pull off. These guys will fuck you up, and they're the easy ones. The other type carries a rivet gun, which is a hit scanning weapon that can basically instant kill you. So yeah, expect to be spamming health packs and sidestepping to stay alive. The daddies are a nice way of controlling the player's ammo supply with a risk/reward situation. Only a few problems. The reward is so overwhelmingly important that pretty much no player is going to make the choice to play it safe. You need those little sisters for their Atom to get upgrades. If you ignore them, you are in for an even bigger world of hurt once the enemies start getting tougher. Because of this, using your armor-penetrating rounds on robots is very obviously a foolish decision when you have no certainty when your next Big Daddy fight is going to be. Worse, none of the fights are cost neutral. You are always going to have less after fighting a Big Daddy than you did before, and there are simply too many of them. The game could have easily been rebalanced around getting more Atom from fewer little sisters and having like one Big Daddy per level that was a bigger deal when you saw him. There was a point where I was fighting a daddy every 10 minutes in my notes, and at that point, it wasn't even a big deal anymore thanks to my upgraded weapons. I did make the player choice to disable the Vita chambers, although this was a few hours in. I hadn't used them up to that point. That was because I had quick saves, which was bound to F8 by default, by the way. What is this heresy? You don't put the quick save button next to the quick load button unless you like accidents. The two systems seem at odds with one another, although I am at least thankful I still have the option to save and I'm not just forced to use the respawn chamber. The Vita chambers on death will revive the player at the chamber, at no cost with damage still standing on enemies, so victory is more so assured than ever before. Beating the game is inevitable, it's just a matter of how many times you're prepared to die to achieve it. Not that the game is particularly difficult in the first place. Barring the Big Daddies, you have splicers. You have the ones that use pipes, the ones that use revolvers and Tommy guns, and the ones that throw bombs. The ones that climb around on ceilings with melee weapons, and the ones that disappear and use plasmids. I find it strange that a minority of splicers actually use plasmids, considering that was supposed to be the reason everyone went crazy in the first place. Just seems like an obvious bit of diegetic storytelling that's missing. However, the big problem is that none of them are comparable in threat level to the Big Daddies. They pose a threat in numbers, something the game did rarely, likely for performance reasons that no longer matter in 2020. It was very obvious on multiple occasions that bodies were despawning if more than 4 fought me because they would leave their loot in a little box. At one point, the game throws 3 splicers at me, and this is supposed to be a big threat for me to run away from. I just stood here because, well, I want to kill them and loot their wallets. Are you kidding me? 3 splicers isn't a threat, it's a fucking warm-up. And then the game takes away my player choice and forces me into the next level, so it doesn't even have a scenario where they break through, it's just, here you go. When the game first introduces the spider splicer, not the first time at the beginning of the game when they kill Johnny, the second time at the wharf, it has this fight one. Only this guy has a lot more health than usual. You aren't supposed to actually fight or beat this splicer yet, so the game gives him an obscene amount of health. Which is stupid because I still knock out a third of its health. The game is drastically underestimating my level of competence and ability to fight. Why not give them a normal amount of health and an extra line if you manage to actually beat it, acknowledging our skill and suggesting our task of getting the subsequent pictures will be a lot easier? This is where the camera comes in. You can take pictures of enemies, and it actually has a use as it includes damage buffs for us against these types if you take enough pictures. It's a neat idea. Where it shits the bed is after you get the camera, the enemies take their cue to start leveling themselves up. So really, it's not an option. To level the playing field, it's mandatory if you want your guns to keep doing damage. And even then, the first 3 guns will fall off eventually. The aforementioned revolver, the Tommy gun, and the shotgun. They are not nearly powerful enough in the later levels. If I shove my shotgun barrel halfway up an enemy's ass and they don't die when I pull the trigger, you have a defective shotgun. And 4 shells? 4 shells? This is even more insulting because I recently bought a shotgun and it's a shorty that holds 5 plus 1 in the chamber. This is a full size that folds 3 plus 1. After we get the picks, we go in and meet with the smugglers and I'm asked to deposit my weapons. Well, that's an obvious trap. So we have a plasmid-only boss fight and it's pretty fun. But after I go to get my weapons back and most of my ammo is gone. And don't say the smugglers stole it because I just killed all the smugglers. That's what the fucking boss fight was. The smugglers didn't steal my ammo. Ken Levine stole my ammo. Lord knows what he needs it for, but it ain't another BioShock game. I should probably mention this at some point, but the splicers are all fighting us because they are being controlled by Andrew Ryan's pheromones. There are also hallucinations of past events, supposedly from genetic tampering, which is bullshit because that would imply the plasmids were created after said events. So, pheromones and genetic memory. Any other 2000 pseudoscience we want to peddle? Oh, the Vita chambers run on quantum field entanglement? How do I segue back on the topic from that? There's a frag launcher, which you should save ammo for the big daddy fights. Although honestly, you would probably be better off throwing these grenades than shooting them from this pathetic piece. There's the chemical thrower that I forgot existed between playing the game and writing this. I did use it, but usually when I would max out the ammo. It just seems redundant to have a chemical thrower that can shoot the same 3 RPG elements when those elements exist as powers on our hand. Why would I pull out my flamethrower and spend time reloading it to the electric gel when I could just as easily switch to my electric bolt power instantly? There's the crossbow. It's one of the worst gaming crossbows in existence. It does really high damage, but the camera is really jerky. Even at low DPI and sensitivity, I could not get the camera to move very smoothly, which is important in first-person shooters when you want to be accurate with precise shots. There's no zoom, which is fine, but it means that our crossbow is a close-range weapon, which leads to our best weapon, the wrench. It starts weak, but with a few tonics, it becomes a life-leeching machine. You won't be killing any big daddies with it, but normal enemies? You can upgrade yourself to move faster, take less damage, heal from more health kits, to do more damage with the wrench, to research targets and steal health from hits. It's a sign that this game is messed up when I instinctively reach for my melee weapon over the shotgun because it's more reliable. Oh no, it's page 8, and that means this is going to be a long video, or we can do it in 2 parts.